don't know the answer, I'll make one up.
Okay. Alright, well, I guess my first question is, what years did you serve in the military?
From 1942 until 1946.
Okay.
September 42 to February 46.
Alright, and what branch were you part of?
I was in the Navy.
Navy. United States Navy. And, do you remember, like, where you were and what you were doing when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, I was in Maine. I was working up in Maine.
Right. So, is that one of the reasons you enlisted, or were you drafted, or what?
I didn't go in until September of 42. And I was old enough to be drafted, and I knew what branch of service I wanted to serve in. And
right.
The only way you could get the branch that you wanted was to enlist.
If you enlist, right.
So I enlisted.
Great. And where were you stationed during the war?
Well, when I first went in, of course, I went to what they call basic training.
Right.
Or it was called boot camp, and that was in Newport, Rhode Island. And basic training was a very short period. It was just a month, just 4 weeks. And after basic training, everybody that went home for a week, they had a week's leave. And then I went back to Newport and was there until December, when I went to Portsmouth, Virginia, for what they call Hospital Corps School. I was a medic in the Navy. And that was really a very short, intensive course. We were only there in December. I left there in February. And went to a new hospital that was just being opened up on Long Island, St. Albans, a big naval hospital. And I was at the naval hospital in St. Albans until February of 44. And I went from there to what they call a marshalling area on Long Island, Lido Beach, Long Island. And that there was an operation called Foxy 29, and it was preparing a contingency of hospital personnel to take care of the wounded, injured, during the Normandy invasion.
Oh.
And there were thousands of us there. And I went from there aboard the LST 523, which is a landing ship. It was the largest of the landing ships. And I boarded that in Boston. And we went from there to Halifax and joined a convoy of a lot of other LSTs and merchant ships, and then proceeded from Halifax in a convoy across the North Atlantic in March. And it took us 21 days to go from Halifax to Plymouth, England. And when we arrived in England, all of the medical personnel were sent to a place called Foy, F-O-Y, England, for a training period in chemical warfare treatment, in case the Germans decided to use chemical warfare. They never did, but we had that training. And then back to the ship, and our home port for the invasion was Portsmouth.
So, how long were you overseas total?
Well, a very short period. I arrived in England at the end of March, and came home in October of '44.
And so, how much were you able to be in contact with your family and friends back home while you were over there?
Not at all,
Not at all.
except by mail.
Right.
And it was during the invasion, of course, why you didn't get mail.
Right.
But we participated in the invasion on June 6th, in
Right.
1944. And the LSTs, most of them were set up to also be, they took in troops and supplies and into the beach. And then were equipped to function as field hospitals to transport the injured back to England. We had 20 hospital corpsmen aboard and 2 doctors, and we had a complete on the what they call a tank deck. We had what would be considered a complete field hospital.
Wow.
With operating room and everything, and our first trip back, on D-Day, going into Normandy, it was very stormy, but you get up on the crest of a wave, and all you could see either side of you was just ship after ship after ship, and the smaller ships, and an LSD is, even though it's 230 feet long, is considered to be a smaller ship. It's not like a battleship or a cruiser. But the battleships and cruisers were out in the channel in back of it, and were bombarding the French coast, and you could hear those big shells going overhead. It sounded like a freight train. And on D-Day, we didn't see a German plane at all. It was just the Allied planes going overhead, one after the other.
The skies.
Yeah. And the German planes didn't come over until after dark, and they dropped flares, and the anti-aircraft fire from the ships and the shore batteries. Well, the flares lit things up so that you could stand on the deck and read a newspaper. It was that bright. And the bombardment from the ships and from the shore batteries, the shrapnel, you could hear it hitting the deck when it came back down, because your planes, a lot of them were right overhead. And our first trip back, we had 144 casualties on board.
Wow.
And I think 41 or 42 were German prisoners.
So, which of the beaches was your ship directly headed for?
Okay, on D-Day, we hit what they call Omaha Beach.
Right, that was the one where most of the casualties were.
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
It was so stormy that we couldn't go into the beach. We unloaded the troops and the supplies and the vehicles off onto small boats, and they took them in. But going back to England that first trip, the doctors performed 4 amputations on board right in the field hospital. And our only the only one we lost out of the 144 was one German prisoner. And most of the German prisoners weren't really German. They were Polish and Czechoslovakian, and most of them were very happy to be captured because they didn't want to be in the German army to start with. They were conscripted and forced to serve. And we happened to have on board one of the crew was a fellow who could speak Polish and could talk to them in their own language. So, and then we made 2 more trips after that into Omaha Beach with troops and supplies and brought back more casualties each trip. And then on the 19th of June, we were taking in troops and supplies to Utah Beach. That was the one further south. And we hit a mine and sunk the ship. The mine was large enough. So, the mine we hit the mine, and then we had the Army engineers on board with a lot of explosives, and those detonated, and it blew the ship clear in two. One piece was over here, one piece was over here, and I was on what they call the bow. And we got picked up, of course. We eventually abandoned ship, got into the water. A lot of the casualties, we were able to, our small boats that were to be used for such emergencies, the explosion was so devastating that they were jammed and we couldn't get them off the ship. And all we had to use were what they call balsa rafts. But we got most of the casualties onto rafts, and then the rest of it just jumped in, and I got picked up by another ship.
So, who were your commanding officers, and did you have any, or did you ever meet any of your generals or anything like that?
Oh no, the on board ship, the commanding officer was just a lieutenant, one of the lowest grades in the officer corps in the Navy. And the doctors were just interns, just out of med school.
Let's see. So did anyone on board or you or anyone get any kind of medals and that sort of thing?
Well, I didn't happen to. I mean, my injuries were not severe enough. I had no cuts, but I was standing on the deck when all that explosion took place.
Wow.
And the compression from the concussion jammed my knees. And the next day, when I left knee was about that big around.
Wow.
But there were fellows, of course, that got they had visual wounds, and they got the Purple Heart.
Oh.
But I don't know of anybody that got anything like any other awards. We had We had over 400 combat engineers on board, and from what I've been told, we lost over 300 of them.
Wow.
The Navy, the crew was about 110, and we only lost about 10 from the Navy.
So, what was it like to come home after being away overseas for those months?
Well, I didn't really come home.
Wow.
I came back to the state. The people that were what they call survivors from from events like that. We were most all of us sent to what they call a survivor camp, and that was in Scotland, and we came home in October, and we came home on the Queen Elizabeth.
So during your whole time in the military, how were your living conditions?
But the Navy was good. I mean, you always knew where you were going to sleep, and your food was usually pretty good, and after I got back to the States, I was sent to a school in Oklahoma. The Navy had a naval hospital in Norman, Oklahoma, and I went there for further training, and then eventually went to a naval hospital in Asbury Park, New Jersey, and I was there until I got out of the Navy in February of '46.
What sort of things would you do when you were in the States rather than overseas?
Well, I spent when I came back. Well, and before I went at St. Albans, I spent all my time in the personnel office, and at St. Albans, and then at Asbury Park, I was in the personnel and medical records office. So that I didn't, except for being while I was overseas, I didn't do much actual hospital duty. It was mostly administrative.
And so when you were overseas, you did a lot more actual type medical.
Well,
Right.
the thing on board the ship, there were 20 hospital personnel, plus the 2 doctors. The hospital corpsman was pretty much like a nurse. You had to do the things that nurses do in a hospital. Administer shots, even certain personnel worked in the operating room just like an operating room nurse.
So towards the end of the war, when the United States was dropping atomic bombs on Japan, what was your opinion on using atomic bombs in order to end the war?
At the time, I had no opinion. I mean, if it ended the war, I was for it. People didn't know. They didn't. The first the general public really knew about atomic bombs was when the first one was dropped.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to that time, we didn't even suspect such a thing existed.
Right.
The average person or the average guy in the service. So any opinion that I might have on atomic energy is subsequent to my being in the service.
So now, do you think it was a good idea, or do you think that it would have been better to end it some other way?
Okay, anything I say on that is strictly an opinion because it's not I'm not well enough educated on the entire subject and don't know all the ramifications. But my opinion is that in the long run it saved more lives than it destroyed.
That's what I thought.
And so while it was a necessary evil, I'll put it that way.
Yep. Well, from what I've heard, if they hadn't done that, they would have had to do a land invasion. That would have lost even more people.
And it would have been our American lives as well as Japanese lives instead of just Japanese.
Right.
So, and to my way of looking at it, atomic energy it's there, and the thing to do is to learn how to use it correctly, and not say it's evil or the atomic energy in itself isn't evil. It's the people that use it and the way they use it.
The way it's used.
Yeah.
So, what are some other memories that you have of your whole time in the service?
Well, I know I made some good friends, and we still have reunions.
Mm-hmm. Aside from that, I was there because it wasn't something that I really liked. Right.
I didn't. Okay, I made the best of it.
Right.
And military life per se, I don't like it because I don't like the regimentation. But I needed to be there, and that's the way most of the fellows looked at it. You didn't have conscientious objectors back then. or beatniks, whatever you want to call them.
So, I assume you were still on duty when you found out that the war was over.
Oh yeah, I was
in the
at Asbury Park, New Jersey.
Since you were still in the service in 1946.
Yeah. Yeah, the war was over, and then you gradually were released from duty. It was based on a point system. And for example, serving overseas with so many points, being sunk with so many points, your age with so many points, but not too bad you were married and had a family with so many points. And once you got up to a certain level in points, you could get out. You had the option. Most of the fellows had the option of what they call re-enlisting or being released.
Okay. Well, that's all the questions I have. So, do you have anything else you would like to add or say?
No, I guess. I mean, have I given you enough?
Yeah, this is actually a very good amount for what I was assigned to do. So,
what is a school project?
Yeah, you're supposed to interview either a veteran or somebody that just lived through World War II and hear about how it affected them and everything. So, and just write a short paper on it.
Do you have access to a scanner?
Yeah, I could get access to one. I don't have one personally, but
Yeah.
I do have
I
access.
just wondered if a picture would help your project at all.
That actually might be nice if that would be possible. So, what year was this taken?
That was taken in 1945 at the Naval Office of the office in the Naval Hospital in Norman, Oklahoma.
You wouldn't mind if I got a scan of this and they brought it back over, or maybe at the next meeting or something like that?
Whatever.
Okay.
As long as they get it back.
Yeah, I'll make sure to. It's a really neat picture. It's a nice picture.
My hair wasn't quite as gray then.
Well, it was a few years ago.
Yeah, it was about 60 years ago.
Actually, let's put this in here. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, if that does it, why, it was easy.
Yeah. I really appreciate it.
Don,
Yeah.
why don't you mention about the reunions you have for those that are left of your group? A nice little sideline extra.
Well, yeah, we've been having a reunion. The last few years it's been at Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. But the fellows from the ship, the survivors, and they're from all over the United, well, not all over, because a lot of them are from Tennessee, from Alabama, from Georgia, from Arkansas, from Massachusetts, New York. And in September we get together, a bunch of us. Old guys like me.
That's neat. Well, yeah, I knew somebody that was actually a prisoner of war from, he lives in New Hampshire, or he lived in New Hampshire, and he has a lot of friends that he's still in touch with from when he was a prisoner. He was on the Bataan Death March, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he still has a few friends that he gets to see every so often.
Yeah, because they, most of us that are still surviving are, there's a couple that we meet with in Pigeon Forge that are, I think they're 79. And I'm one of the oldest, and I'm 84. But anybody that served in the service back then, unless they lied about their age, we had a fellow aboard ship, one of the crew, who was 16.
Really?
He big for his age and lied about his age. And somebody got in.
He wanted to serve?
Yep. So he's just a little older than you.
Yeah.
How old are you now?
I am 15.
You're 15.
Yep, I'll be 16 in June, so that's just about.
Okay, so we had a fellow aboard ship and the crew that was just a year older than you.
Wow. Must have been pretty brave.
So they say he was a big kid, and he looked like